Welcome to the Madison Miller podcast. Tonight's guest is somebody that is the finder of the Berger shop. He's been on the show before. Ryan Berger, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday evening?
Doing well. Weather's getting warmer. People are getting vaccinated. Things are turning the corner slowly but surely.
Absolutely, turning the corner for sure. And something else that's coming up is the baseball season too, so that should be a lot of fun as well.
Can't wait.
Yeah, that's
10 days or so, and we'll be locked in for 162.
Yep, that too. All right, so the trade deadline for the NBA is on Thursday, and to me, one of the biggest subplots of the deadline has emerged within the last couple days with LeBron with the big ankle injury. He's going to be out for almost a month. Anthony Davis is still out. So do you think that there's pressure on the Lakers to go out and make a move, whether that's in the trade market or in the buyout market, to make themselves like afloat a little bit until their stars come back?
I'm sure they'll have to do something. Davis is always banged up, whereas LeBron is so rarely banged up. They're going to obviously have to do something because the West is so competitive. They can fall down very quickly as we get towards the end of the year here. So I would expect them to do some sort of move. Again, they don't have a ton of assets available, but as always, they'll find guys and get guys on buyouts and things of that nature. So I expect them to definitely be in the market.
Yes, me too. To me, the guy that would make sense for them is Andre Drummond. Marc Gasol really hasn't been the same guy, even as the same as he was even with the Raptors when he was playing well for them. And to me, Drummond would make a lot of sense with the Lakers. What do you make about Drummond potentially going there?
Yeah, I mean, Drummond is a guy, he really gives you a down-low game and a significant rebounder. I think when you get rid of those two guys on the Lakers, their roster is really, really limited across the board. So I think they need help all over the place. I think the wings that they have are very, very questionable. Kuzma continues to, really not be able to step up in these kind of situations. So finding somebody that they can pair with him and Horton Tucker and some of the other guys to just stay afloat. Because, again, that West is super competitive.
Yes, the West is super competitive. A team in the West that I'm very intrigued for in terms of the trade deadline. They have a ton of assets. They've always been linked to these guys that are available. The Denver Nuggets. Do you expect them to do something before Thursday?
They've had such a great the deepest roster in the league for the last couple of years. This year, they've had a much different kind of run. They had a real hangover after an amazing run in the bubble. They've played better as of late, but still are sort of in that West area that it doesn't feel like they could really win the whole thing. And that's with Jokic having an MVP season. Some of the guys that they've had, Bol as an example, and others that showed some promise, have really given them almost nothing this year. Sometimes you watch the game and you can't believe the five that they have on the court. I would expect them to also find a way to be a buyer in some capacity. I don't expect them to do something very big, but I could see them adding, a piece to their core right now.
Yes, so can I. A name that I'm very interested in terms of a big name on the market, and that's Kyle Lowry. There's been conflicting reports saying that the Raptors do want to trade him, and then there's some saying that they don't want to trade him. What do you think ultimately happens with Kyle Lowry come Thursday?
I think he'll be moved. I think they'll decide together that it's best for him. I think, Philly is a real option there, and a couple of other teams who can use, a point guard. I think, he's an interesting fit actually in New York, but if he's looking to win a championship, I think a place like Philly and a couple of other places is obviously a better fit.
Yeah, Philly to me is the team that should go out and get Lowry. That to me puts them right there at Brooklyn among the teams to be. And you can't rule out Milwaukee either because Giannis is really upped his game. And do you expect the Bucks to do something, or do you think that PJ Tucker was it?
Yeah, I don't expect them. They've made a bunch of moves. They had a lot of new pieces. I don't expect them to make any moves. I also don't expect anything different from them postseason with these moves. I just, the moves are interesting, and I think they're loaded with talent. But at the end of the day, it's the same. You're going to watch the same exact structure where there's 5 guys out at the 3-point line. The only difference is Tucker and Holiday are going to be instead of the other guys. And Giannis is going to have the ball in the middle. And the defense is going to force Giannis to do the same thing they did in the playoffs, which is make shots or kick it out to guys. And whether those guys and DiVincenzo are going to be able to make shots in the big spot, they haven't the last couple of years. Now they have some new pieces. Will these guys be able to make shots? Will Giannis? He's been incredible, again, numbers-wise. I just don't know if they're going to be able to win this year.
Yeah, I'm not so sure either. I would rather predict Philly or Brooklyn over them for sure. A name that's also floated out in trade rumors is Victor Oladipo of the Rockets. Obviously, was traded in the James Harden deal with Indiana and Brooklyn and Cleveland, but Indiana sent Oladipo to Houston, and obviously LeVert went from Brooklyn to Indiana. I think Oladipo's getting moved again. I think Miami's a good fit for him. I wouldn't rule out the Knicks either. Do you see anybody else in play for Oladipo? Maybe even Denver?
I don't see Denver being in play for him. I think the Knicks like him. I just am not sure exactly what you would have to give up for him. And if you're going to give up, I just think those young pieces like Frank and Knox and picks, I just personally, so that you can get the 6th, or 7th, playoff spot and get slaughtered by Milwaukee. I just don't think that makes any sense to me, especially if you're going to then have to pick up a new deal with Oladipo. Miami always feels like a good fit for so many guys. I can see that, with him. And then out west, it depends on, again, what teams are, you look at some of the teams that are, in that mix right now, and, a team even like Golden State who's trying to hold on, he might be an interesting fit, even though, they're just sort of stuck with, who they have. But yeah, he's an interesting wild card right now for sure.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated to see where he lands. A team that has a ton of assets to trade and has been in the rumor mill for the past month or so is the Orlando Magic. I do not think they're going to trade Nikola Vucevic. I think potentially Evan Fournier and some others on that team could be had. What do you make of Orlando's situation?
Well, Aaron Gordon sounds like he'll be moved. Boston sounds like they're a logical place. Boston needs some sort of a shake-up. Even Oladipo there feels like it's a fit that could potentially happen. I think, when you look at the Celtics as an example, they're in the 8th spot in the East right now, right? So, they've got a lot of work to do to even get up to the top 3, because between 4 and 8, they're 1 game apart. So there's lots of parity in the league right now. And I think obviously some of these pieces that might be moved could be really, really, crucial and important to some of the teams.
I agree. And Boston, to me, is the team under the most pressure at the deadline because of that big trade exception they got from Charlotte in the Gordon Hayward thing and the Sidon trade. So, and Oladipo there would be kind of weird, in my opinion. I think it's a weird fit. I don't know if I like that there. Maybe he would come off the bench. That to me is just a weird fit. I like Miami for Oladipo. I think that would be a decent fit for him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like Aaron Gordon in Boston. He's a little bit more impactful and a little bit bigger. I know Boston would love to get their hands on Vucevic, but it sounds to me, like you said, that Orlando doesn't really want to move him.
Yeah, Aaron Gordon would be a better fit in Boston than Oladipo in my mind. You know who else would be a good fit in Boston? Harrison Barnes. Do you think he gets moved?
Yeah, I think the Kings have to, they're constantly struggling with their core. They thought they had the right pieces. They're in the West, 7 games under 500, which isn't horrendous, but when you look at that, it's actually the 3rd worst record in the West today. So they're in trouble as far as making the playoffs this year, once again, and getting rid of that Barnes contract and freeing up some more playing time for some of the younger players and a little bit more space makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, that does make sense too. An interesting team at the deadline.
I'm just not sure Harrison Barnes is an answer and is that big of a difference for anybody when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I like Harrison Barnes. I just think that people just give him too much crap for the finals in 2016. That guy's been in a lot of big games. I'm a bigger fan of Harrison Barnes than most. Speaking of Harrison Barnes, his former team, the Warriors, they've been in the Oladipo mix. I don't know if the Warriors are going to do anything big. Do you see anything big from Golden State?
I think Oladipo is an interesting fit, as I mentioned there before, for there. They're really hamstrung with assets. They don't have a lot of stuff going on. So that's going to be a little bit difficult. I'd be interested to see what they can get, for him. But it's tough. They're in a tough scenario. They have obviously a banged up Curry. They're right on the precipice of hanging in there. One game over 500. That Draymond looks a little tired to me, been banged up. So I don't know. I mean, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Golden State and if they want to play to have another top draft pick.
Yeah, I ultimately think that Curry comes back and they're gonna probably be either in the play-in tournament or will end up in like that 6th spot. That's where I think where Golden State goes. To me, a team that should make a deal, but I don't know if they will because they are in a lack of assets because of a trade they made a couple years ago, and that is the Dallas Mavericks I'm talking about. Obviously, those assets are with the Knicks in that Porzingis deal. To me, they have to make a trade to make themselves better if they want to go on a run. What do you make of the Mavs?
I think they're just never whole. They're in the 8th spot, 41 games they've played. They're 3 over 500. They had a terrible start. They're playing a lot better now. Doncic did not have a good start. He was out of shape. He's come back and obviously played really, really well. But they're just starting to get whole with Porzingis back. And as they get whole, he'll get hurt again. And that's, sort of the scenario over there. And Jalen Brunson's been really good. And I know they're really, really high on him to take the next step over the second half of the season and, into next year. Cuban and Carlisle are as good as it gets, so I can see them definitely finding a way to bring somebody in to, team with those guys and, Josh Richardson. And, I imagine they'll be a playoff team, somewhere in that, 6 to 9 spot.
Yeah, I talked about Harrison Barnes earlier. I like the idea of him on Dallas. To me, they could use like a forward, like a stretch 4 type of guy.
Yeah, I mean, they play Max Kleber there. I mean, they're not strong. They don't have depth, so I can see that. I just don't know if adding Harrison Barnes takes them from the 9 to the 7 or the 6. And then if it just takes you to the 8 and solidifies the 8, is it really worth it to play in the first round and then take on that whole Harrison Barnes contract? It's just not impactful enough. But I obviously understand, the importance to make the playoffs.
Yeah, all right. We have alluded to this team a couple times in the podcast already. The New York Knicks, to me, have been the biggest overachievers in the league this year. Tom Thibodeau's been awesome. R.J. Barrett, year 2 jump. Julius Randle's an all-star. To me, they already made their move with Derrick Rose. Do you see them doing something else? Maybe like trading away an Austin Rivers or maybe a Peyton move or somebody on an expiring or something like that? Or do you think that they stand pat?
I think it's a battle every day there between Thibodeau and the front office. I think the front office has done a pretty good job of staying pat so far and accumulating all the picks from the last couple of years. Again, this front office hasn't done much as far as that's concerned, but because they stepped into a situation where there was lots of picks available and obviously chose the right coach to build the right culture back into the Garden and to New York. The the push and pull there is Thibodeau wants guys who can play now. I'm sure he wants Oladipo. I'm sure he wants anybody that he can get his hands on. And the front office has to be smart about, again, who's really impactful, looking at who's out there, and do you really want to give up one of your assets? So whether those are draft picks, which they have a bunch of, or the young pieces, which to some people they're higher on some of those guys than others, and that's obviously Knox and Frankie and Mitch. And depending on the value of those guys, obviously, is depending on what you feel comfortable going after. So that whether or not they decide to make a move will be whether or not Thibodeau won out from asking and begging Leon to bring more win-now guys to the team.
Yeah, to me, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do come Thursday. I think Brooklyn's going to stand pat. What do you make about Brooklyn?
The biggest thing with them is just getting Durant healthy. If Durant's healthy, they're the favorite to win the whole thing. He's, again, just always banged up, it feels like, and Harden's been sensational. So it'll be they got to get Durant back, and then they have to get those guys used to playing with each other. They don't want to get him back and have him play 3 games and then the playoffs start. But it's I don't see them adding pieces. They've got, I see them adding guys on buyouts in the next couple weeks, as opposed to trading, which they don't really have any, real assets to trade. So if they do, they'll find something to move. But they'll be active in some kind of way, just, adding, I would think, veterans that get bought out.
Yeah, to me, they're like the Lakers in the sense of they're going to be getting guys from the buyout market. To me, a team that feels like they're hamstrung in terms of young assets and picks, the Los Angeles Clippers. I just really don't see an avenue for them to make a big deal for somebody impactful. Maybe they're a buyout guy candidate potentially. I can see them getting some buyout guys. What do you make about the Clippers?
Yeah, same thing. They don't have much assets. They would have to trade a Lou Williams or somebody of that nature, and I just don't see them breaking up that core. So yeah, a buyout for sure. I could see that happening.
Yeah. Something just came down on my phone here. We just talked about Kyle Lowry and the Heat potentially being a match. Tyler Herro is the quote unquote sticking point in the Raptors Heat trade talks for Kyle Lowry. That comes from Bleacher Report's Sportsnet was the source. I wouldn't do that if I'm Miami throwing Tyler Herro in a Kyle Lowry trade. Would you?
No, I wouldn't. I just don't think Miami's that close. Where if they add Kyle Lowry, they're going to be able to beat Milwaukee, Philly, and certainly Brooklyn. So to give up a big piece of your future just doesn't make sense to me, and I'm sure Riley feels the same way. I don't see them beating those teams in the East, let alone the West, with adding Kyle Lowry. You better on Lowry and Alonzo Ball.
Yeah, I do not see Tyler Herro being in a package for Kyle Lowry. I mean, I could see a world where the Heat get him without giving up Tyler Herro, like maybe give up like a Duncan Robinson and a couple picks, but I don't see Herro going anywhere. That guy is really, really good, and I remember he had that awesome playoff game against the Celtics in the bubble. Another team I didn't talk about that's interesting come Thursday's Indiana. I saw a report that they are listening on Brogdon. I'd be shocked if Brogdon was moved. What do you think that could happen with Indiana come Thursday?
I'll be shocked if he's moved as well. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening. I think he's got, they really like him there. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I don't see that happening either. If anything, maybe Miles Turner because of that conundrum with him and Sabonis. But no way. Like, I saw that, pop up and I'm like, no chance. I think he's a big part of their future. We talked about Herro at Miami. I think that Brogdon's a big part of Indiana's future, and there's a reason why they went and overpaid for him a couple summers ago. And he's having a great, great season. I don't see any way they move on from from Brogdon. Yeah, so Miles Turner, do you see him potentially getting moved or staying put?
I can see Miles Turner. I just think Indiana feels like they could they could be competitive in the first round, and I think they can be too. So I think that they'll be buyers, if anything.
Yes, I agree with you. I could see them being buyers as well. I think they are a better team than the record indicates. To me, they're a Tier 2 East team with like Boston and Miami. And I put those three teams together because they have all underachieved this year, in my opinion. I still think that they have a chance to be competitive in the playoffs. So I think that there's a chance they deal Miles Turner for like a power forward, maybe not Aaron Gordon, but somebody like a power forward type of player or a wing maybe. But I don't see them moving on from Brogdon or Sabonis or anybody like that. That to me was the wildest rumor that I saw, the Brogdon rumor. Another surprise name that could be moved, and I don't think it would be a surprise anymore because it's been talked about a lot over the past week or so. Norman Powell of the Raptors. I know we talked about Lowry earlier. What do you make of Norman Powell? I think he stays put.
I think he's going to get a big contract this summer, though. I think he's a good player, and he's got a chance to be really good. Just bought his actual top shot moment. I'm a fan of Norman Powell and think he's going to get a big contract this summer wherever he goes.
Yeah, so do I. That guy's going to get a lot of money. That's all I'm going to say. I don't know if that's going to be with the Raptors or elsewhere. I know we talked about some surprise names that could be moved, like Brogdon. What's a name that we haven't heard yet leaked out to the media that you think could potentially be on the move? I saw Brogdon's name, so I don't think it will be Brogdon, but Brogdon would have been a good example of this. Who's a name that you think could be moved but hasn't been mentioned yet among the media?
It's a good question. I think the Spurs are always active and they're always involved in stuff. They have a couple of young pieces that I know that they like, but they've had a nice season and an added piece there. Towns is obviously an interesting play. I know the Knicks love him, as do many teams, but I know the Knicks love to get their hands on him. Those are two guys I think would be interesting to look at. Alonzo Ball obviously is been a lot of discussions with with what happens with him after the season as well.
Yeah, Alonzo Ball's interesting. I think he stays put with New Orleans. He's having a great year. I think he stays put, and it's unfortunate what happened to his brother. Boy, that really sucked with LaMelo breaking his wrist. Do you think Charlotte does anything, by the way?
No, I don't see them doing anything. I don't see Charlotte doing anything.
Really? You don't see them making a move for a big guy?
Nothing impactful. I mean, something, I don't think that the team is good enough, especially with the injury. I don't see why they would make such a, he's out for the year.
That's true. He is out for the year. That's so bad. I feel so bad for that team and those fans because they were having a good year. I had them in that tier with the Knicks and the Bulls, like those surprisingly good Eastern Conference teams. They're surprisingly decent East teams. And you could argue the Wizards belong in that tier as well, but they've just been badly underachieving this year. So I wouldn't even put the Wizards in that tier. And I don't see Bradley Beal being moved either. But I won't be shocked if there is a trade that no one saw coming and it came from left field, a la Tobias Harris a couple years ago from the Clippers to the Sixers. That came out of nowhere. There's always a trade that comes out of nowhere. I feel like I've said this, I don't know if it was to you or another guest I had on the podcast before an NBA trade deadline. I said there's always that trade that comes out of left field. I remember it was Porzingis one year, although that wasn't at the deadline. That was maybe a couple weeks before. That came out of left field. But I feel like there is going to be something that comes out of left field. Maybe it comes from Indiana, for crying out loud.
The NBA, it's fantastic.
Yeah, like the Paul George Oklahoma City Clippers trade came out of nowhere. That came out of left field. I'll never forget where I was when I found out that Paul George got done. There was like at 2 o'clock in the morning, and everybody just went nuts. I'll never forget that. And I think I had an emergency podcast the next day, too. All right, so trade deadline should be a lot of fun. I'm sure everybody's going to be tweeting about it on Thursday. But the big story from the weekend in sports was March Madness. We love March Madness. Did you do a bracket?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm involved in several brackets. All of them are busted.
All mine are busted too, courtesy of a 15, a 14, and two 13s going pretty far. Was it two 14s? It was a
Yeah, I mean
15.
it's been a wild couple of days, and the tournament's been really really fun to watch. I personally loved Illinois and had a lot of Texas, in the brackets, so mine's look pretty busted.
Yeah, I had Illinois to the Elite Eight. My Final Four is surprisingly still intact. As busted as my bracket is, my Final Four is still good. Gonzaga, Baylor, Alabama, and Houston. I knew I threw a curveball in mine. I always tend to do that every year. Go with the team that nobody's picking, and I went with Houston, and they're still in it. They're obviously in the Sweet 16 and almost lost to Rutgers. Came darn close to losing the Rutgers. What did you make of Rutgers' run?
I thought they made a great run, but they must be absolutely sick how they lost that game. Up 9 with 4 minutes left, holding the ball out way too much. I hated how slow they played. They played so well. Their defense was so good. It's a shame that they lost that game at the end. That's a loss that you won't be able to sleep for a month as a coach losing that game.
Yeah, Steve Pickles, their coach. They that was a rough one for Rutgers. But yeah, I had Houston to the Final Four in my bracket. And then obviously Texas. You said you had Texas going pretty deep. That was Abilene Christian, the guy that made the go ahead free throws was like a 50% free throw shooter. John Rothstein on Twitter. That's just a classic. This is March type of moment, right?
Yeah, I mean teams shoots 21% from three and turns the ball over a ton, and somehow you lose the game. It's impossible to believe. It's impossible to believe they lost that game. UCLA manhandled that team. That team is not good. That's just a horrific loss, and it's just embarrassing. An embarrassing loss for Texas.
Absolutely, and I think UCLA can win their Sweet 16 matchup. I'm not calling for the upset win for UCLA in the Sweet 16, assuming that they're a big dog, but I think that they have a chance come Sweet 16. I'm blanking on their opponent.
Who are they up against?
I think it's Syracuse.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's. I don't see that being a big underdog. I'm sure. It's a pretty close line. Those are two good, very, very well coached teams. Both teams play a lot of zone. That'll be a very interesting game.
Or no, it's Alabama, not Syracuse. Syracuse is playing Houston. That's my bad. I thought it was Syracuse because I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's my bad.
It'll be a good game though. UCLA is tough, but they're probably getting 6 or 7 points in that game.
Yeah, I think Alabama's decent too, but I think that's going to be a close game, UCLA and Bama. And then Syracuse plays Houston, obviously. Buddy Boeheim's just been awesome for the Orange. Right. I think that's a competitive game too.
2 months, hasn't missed. He's money. Houston plays great defense. That'll be a fun, different philosophy kind of game.
Yeah, and what do you make of Villanova making it to the Sweet 16 without Colin Gillespie?
Just an honor, to watch those guys and how well coached they are, and amazing that they were able to do what they've done. Really, really, just respect what Jay Wright's built and how good those guys and how hard they play.
Yeah, me too. All right, last question. If you had to, at gunpoint, pick the national championship winner, who is it?
I mean, my answer is it's Gonzaga if there's a gun at my head. If there's not a gun in my head, I think Oregon's got a real good chance.
Ooh, Oregon. That's a good sleeper team. I think they're going to beat USC, actually. I'll give you that. But I'm with you. I think it's going to be Gonzaga as well. That was my pick before the tournament started, and I'm sticking with it. I think that they're going to go undefeated, and it'll be the first undefeated team since Indiana back in, I believe it was like 1976 or something like that. So, Ryan, it was such a pleasure to have you on today. We'll probably have you on again maybe before the NBA playoffs, and we can talk some playoff basketball once that time rolls around.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. Appreciate it. Stay healthy.